Today, we're diving into something that feels entirely modern, yet boasts a surprisingly ancient paper trail. We are going to trace the actual, verified history of the world's most famous, and yeah, definitely most infamous, hand gesture.
You know, when we see this gesture today, we just naturally assume it's a product of our modern world, right? It really feels like something born straight out of road rage, rowdy sports crowds, or just the endless stream of internet culture and memes. It feels completely tied to our current era.
But smash cut to reality. The historical paper trail for this thing actually goes all the way back to classical Athens. We're talking over 2,000 years ago. Ancient Greek writers were already making obscene jokes involving the middle finger. So yes, this everyday insult is literally older than the Roman Empire itself. And the real history is far stranger and honestly a whole lot more fascinating than any of those wild origin stories you might see floating around online. So let's track the evidence together.
Part 1. Proving a disappearing gesture and the historian's dilemma. The core issue historians face here is pretty unique. Think about it. A bronze sword survives for centuries. A silver coin survives. Stone columns survive. But an ephemeral action, a hand gesture, disappears the exact second it's made. It leaves absolutely no physical ruins to dig up. So this means historians have to reconstruct ancient body language entirely from secondary clues. Because, let's face it, people rarely pause to thoroughly document their everyday body language. Historians have to hunt through some pretty unusual surviving breadcrumbs to track the timeline of an obscure action like this. We're talking about hunting for fleeting mentions in comedic plays, lines in ancient poetry, random anecdotes in biographies, or even incidental details captured in artwork and, much later on, early photographs. So here is an absolutely crucial point to keep in mind. While we can confidently say that ancient Greeks and Romans used an insulting, obscene middle finger gesture, we do not have evidence identifying whoever first invented it. We can prove it was used, but we can't prove exactly where it was born. We have to stick to the story the evidence actually supports without pretending we know more than we do. Moving right into part 2, we're going to look at ancient Greek and Roman records, taking us from classical Athens to the empire. Back in 423 BCE, the playwright Aristophanes produced a comedy called The Clouds. In one scene, the famous philosopher Socrates is trying to teach a character named Strepsiades about poetic rhythm, and he mentions a dactyl. Now, the joke here works beautifully because the Greek word dactyl means a poetic meter, but it also translates literally to a finger or digit. So Strepsiades responds to this little wordplay with a crude finger demonstration that Socrates immediately calls out as vulgar and stupid. Now, what's really fascinating here is that this is one of our earliest surviving literary anchor points. It's quite literally the earliest surviving written reference associated with an obscene middle finger gesture. And again, Aristophanes himself didn't invent the gesture, but his play completely proves that the audience in 423 BCE already knew exactly what that crude finger movement meant. The Greeks also give us another fantastic anecdote. The philosopher Diogenes of Sinope was super famous for deliberately rejecting polite social conventions. According to a later ancient biography, some visitors once wanted to see the famous politician Demosthenes. Well, Diogenes reportedly stretched out his middle finger toward the guy just to contemptuously point him out. And even more incredibly, the text notes Diogenes explicitly explaining how just changing which finger was raised completely shifts how observers judge a person. Talk about knowing your audience. Then, as history marches on, the Romans got involved. And they actually gave the finger an official name, the digitus impudicus. This Latin phrase roughly translates to the indecent finger or the shameless finger. The simple fact that they had a specific, universally recognized name for it tells us that the gesture had acquired a deep, recognizable cultural meaning all across the empire. We see this deep cultural meaning all over Roman texts. The poet Martial provides some really useful evidence in his epigrams, describing someone displaying an impudicus finger toward doctors. And the historian Suetonius describes Emperor Caligula totally humiliating Cassius Chaerea by offering him a hand to kiss that was formed and moved in a highly obscene way. The finger carried such aggressive, obscene sexual symbolism that these Roman writers could just refer to it casually, without even needing to explain the joke to their readers. Which brings us to part 3, the medieval archer myth. This is where the paper trail gets a bit messy. Now, it's absolutely vital we don't fall into a common historical trap here. A lack of surviving written references from the Middle Ages does not mean the gesture simply disappeared or that ordinary people just stopped using it out of nowhere. Remember our earlier point about ephemeral actions?
It simply means the continuity of the gesture becomes incredibly hard to reconstruct.
And this specific gap in the written record leads us straight to a very popular and, spoiler alert, very incorrect internet myth. You've almost definitely seen the claim online that medieval English archers invented the middle finger gesture during the Battle of Agincourt against the French in 1415.
But if we just piece together the timeline, it easily dismantles that myth. I mean, a massive 1,800 years separate our ancient Greek evidence from those medieval archers at Agincourt. The timeline makes it crystal clear it is simply way too late. English archers in 1415 could not have possibly invented an insult that already appeared in ancient sources. Plus, we really shouldn't confuse the single middle finger with the British two-finger V sign. They are totally distinct gestures, and treating them as having the exact same origin is a major historical mistake.
All right, part 4, caught on camera. Let's talk about the 1886 baseball photograph.
In 1886, a truly extraordinary photograph captured Boston and New York baseball players posing together at the Polo Grounds. If you scan the back row, you'll spot something unusual. Right there on the left side, Boston pitcher Charles Old Hoss Radburn is clearly, undeniably raising his middle finger straight toward the camera.
And no, this isn't just a weird trick of the light. It's actually confirmed by the Library of Congress record itself, which specifically notes the obscene gesture. This stands as one of the earliest known photographs capturing this ancient insult in action. It perfectly bridges that massive gap between ancient manuscripts and modern media.
Finally, part 5, the historical verdict, and how the meaning of this gesture changed over 2,400 years.
So let's look at how the application of this hand signal actually evolved. Now, while the modern phrase, flipping the bird, is quite young, and realistically we can't prove that the exact hand pose remained identical in every single century, its recognizable insulting function has survived pretty much flawlessly. Back in ancient times, the usage was heavily weighted toward explicit, aggressive sexual symbolism. Today, while it definitely retains its offensiveness, it's used much more broadly to express general anger, defiance, rebellion, or even just simple dismissal. Look, most people flipping the bird today definitely aren't thinking about classical Rome, but they are utilizing the exact same psychological tool.